Folks, it was not that long ago I was reviewing Turtle Beach's first foray into sim racing with their Velocity 1 race, and now they're back again with another, more budget-friendly entry-level offering, the KD3, which is launching alongside some other hardware we'll talk about later in the video. So the Velocity 1 KD3 bundle includes a direct drive 3.2 Nm wheelbase with an emergency stop button, small display screen, integrated angle adjustment, and the same quick release system as their other base. You get a round 300mm wheel with 20 total inputs, including magnetic paddle shifters, and a set of 2 adjustable Hall effect pedals. This setup is compatible with both Xbox and PC, and is being sold at $450 US, sitting right around the price of many other entry-level direct drive bundles. Let's talk about the base and force feedback first. Right off the bat, I feel like Turtle Beach has addressed a lot of criticism from their first base. The KD3 has a more mature look to it. It's simple and clean, but still has a few sporty design cues. It seems like they've emphasized cooling more as well, and the housing is metal this time around instead of plastic and feels pretty durable. The built-in angle adjustment is nice to see. If you have friends or family using your rig, this is an easy way to tailor it for other sizes without any tools. It does not, however, have granular adjustment. There are 3 set locking points at 0, 10, and 20 degrees. Also worth mentioning here that the KD3 does come with an included desk clamp if you need it. That's easy to install and remove. Moving around to the back of the base, I love to see again that we're using USB-C peripheral connections, and cables are included with the bundle. On the side of the base, we've got our required Xbox buttons, the top one functioning as power, and then again the emergency stop at the top of the base, which, you know, if I'm being nitpicky, is maybe not the best spot for it, but it's only a 3nm wheelbase, and it's nice to see them include one in the first place, so I can't really knock them for that. Then finally, on the front, we have a full RGB light ring surrounding the base, as well as a display screen at the top that can be used to navigate settings, change profiles, or display telemetry for supported games, which gives you a gear and speed indicator, as well as an RPM light that can sync with the surrounding light ring. I really want to see more customization here though, as currently the RPM lights are not configurable and won't match up with the shift timing of most cars, making them not nearly as useful as they could be. That aside, the display is certainly nice to have. Being able to tweak settings on the fly is convenient, and at this price range, most people aren't going to be running an external dash anyway, so having one included, even if it's small and basic, is absolutely a perk. Alright, now let's talk force feedback. Again, this is a 3.2 Nm wheelbase, putting it right at the bottom end of the direct drive market when it comes to torque specs, but as we've seen with other low torque bases like the Moza R3, direct drive is still an advantage over gear and belt driven wheels, even at lower ranges. So make no mistake, you still gain a lot from direct drive, but it's not all perfect on the KD3. The general road and dirt surface feel is solid, the wheel is pretty quick, which makes catching slides and managing oversteer very easy. Drifting actually felt surprisingly good on this base. Curbs feel good, and I still felt like I could keep the car stable over more aggressive bumps or surface changes. However, the front tire feeling on this base is very muted. It's hard to feel out that limit of turn-in. Hard to tell when you're understeering or over-rotating the wheel. It just feels very flat. Interestingly enough, this was the same feedback I gave for their other base, but on that base, the higher strength of the motor was able to sort of mask the issue. Whereas on this, where you have less range, it really exposes that lack of feeling over the front wheels. This is something that in general is going to feel better on a base with higher torque, but there are absolutely some firmware improvements that could be made here, because the similarly spec'd Moza R3 did not really have this issue. So the good news for the KD3 is that anyone upgrading from a budget gear or belt driven wheel like a T300 or the ever popular G29 is still going to be impressed with the feedback of this base. It's quite good in many areas, and firmware can be updated to improve feel. This is not a hardware issue. However, currently the overall feel does lag behind other brands, and again, I had the same issue a year ago with the Velocity 1 race, and firmware is actually a bit of a sore subject we'll come back to later. That said, let's move on to talk about the wheel. Again, I feel like Turtle Beach listened to feedback and designed a more mature looking wheel. There is adjustable RGB, but overall it's a very no frills and honestly fairly realistic looking sports car wheel. I think the design and overall button layout is quite nice, and they've gone with a mostly round wheel, which is something that I really enjoy. There's a small flat spot on the bottom, but it's not enough to interfere with drifting or rally. I always advocate for round wheels being included with bundles like this. It was something I called them out on with the V1 race, and I'm glad to see that the included wheel here is something I can feel more comfortable drifting or rallying with. They've also interestingly chosen to go with a larger rim size. Again, this is a 300mm or roughly 12-inch wheel, which is a bit unusual for a lower strength base. Most companies will bundle in a smaller wheel mostly because it gives you less leverage and makes the base feel stronger. I don't think this was a wrong call though for Turtle Beach. I like the feel of a larger rim, and even as someone that daily drives a wheelbase 3 times as strong as this, I didn't feel like lack of torque was an issue. The wheel is light enough to still respond quickly and give the base enough of a torquey feel, but let's talk about that. While the wheel base on the KD3 is heavy, durable, and more premium feeling, the same can't be said for this wheel. The rim itself is a 2-piece plastic composite shell. You can actually see the seam running down the center, and it feels fairly cheap. Now this is a more entry-level bundle, and if they're gonna cut costs anywhere, honestly I think this is a reasonable place to do it, but ultimately it's unfortunate that the only part you'll be touching most of the time is one of the cheapest feeling parts of the kit. Funny enough, I actually said this exact same thing about the Moza R3, which had a similarly cheap feeling rim. I get that costs have to be cut somewhere. I think this is a logical place to do it, but it's still a bummer. With that said, the quick release and paddle shifters are stronger and metal where it matters, and I was not able to meaningfully flex the wheel rim, so the wheel breaking or something is not a concern of mine. It's just a matter of feel. Moving on to the inputs, like I said, we have a total of 20 on the wheel. However, the top right dial is reserved for navigating the display, and the paddle shifters are, well, most likely to be used as paddle shifters, which leaves us with 15 other programmable buttons. You've got a fairly familiar controller style layout on the face, and then a dial above your left thumb that can be rolled forward or back and pressed down for a third input. Everything feels intuitive and ergonomic. There's enough tactile feedback on the buttons to feel confident about each press, and the paddle shifters feel adequate. If you're looking for more buttons though, or a different rim style entirely, Turtle Beach also just released their first formula wheel, the FRX, that is not included with this bundle but can be purchased separately for either the KD3 or V1 race. I won't be doing a separate review for this, but I did ask if Turtle Beach could send one over so I could talk about it briefly here. The FRX is listed at $250 and is compatible with both Xbox and PC, and is a really appealing budget formula wheel. This rim is much more rigid with an aluminum chassis and a pretty smart button layout. All the face buttons are mechanical and have a good level of travel and clickiness, so even in gloves they feel confident. The front-facing rotary dials also feel quite tactile and can be mapped to either function as left or right, or on PC only, with all 12 individual mappings. On the rear, the shift paddles feel good, and you can now in software bind clutch bite points to the lower axis paddles, which was an issue early on with the V1 race. Back on the front, the bottom buttons and dial function as your wheelbase display navigation. There are 2 D-pads on either side of the rim, which on Xbox will both function as the same D-pad input, and there are 2 side encoders as well, which on Xbox also function as D-pad inputs. And these are maybe the only inputs that don't feel great. The side encoders feel kind of mushy, and they're at a bit of an awkward angle for my thumb, but still completely serviceable. My primary concern with the FRX is again with the RPM display. You cannot change the color mapping in software, which means that for pretty much every car I drove, the shift lights didn't match the car, which makes them effectively useless. I'm assuming this is a software thing and not a hardware limitation, in which case this really should be updated ASAP, because it's a noticeable shortcoming of both the wheel and the base. All the face buttons on the FRX do have individual RGB color choice, so it feels odd that the level of customization doesn't carry over to the arguably much more important RPM display. That aside, this is again a very appealing, more premium wheel being offered at a competitive price point. Now, Turtle Beach does use a proprietary quick release that doesn't currently have any crossover with other sim racing brands, so it's not like you really have a choice to use this on other wheelbases or use other Formula wheels on a Turtle Beach base. But for people already in this ecosystem, it's nice that there is a really quite solid option for a Formula wheel, and maybe down the line they could figure out some adapter to let this work on other bases, because I do think it has potential there. I would love to use this on my main setup. And that brings us finally to the pedals. The KD3 bundle includes a Hall Effect 2-pedal set that has a solid level of adjustability. The faces have multiple mounting points, the brake pedal can be shifted a few centimeters left or right, and both the gas and brake have preload adjustment on the springs so you can dial in the resistance. That's all great to see. I like the travel and feel of the pedals, and while I think this is a solid offering for a bundle like this, you don't have any upgrade path right now within the Turtle Beach ecosystem. I'd love to see them offer the higher end V1 race pedals as a separate purchase or something, because a clutch and load cell brake are significant upgrades, and these KD3 pedals are not modular, so you would need an all new set to get either of those features. Turtle Beach should be making that an easy upgrade path for those that want it. And this brings us to my final thoughts on the KD3 as a whole. It does feel like Turtle Beach has learned some lessons from their previous launch and delivered a more serious, more refined piece of sim racing hardware with smarter design choices across the board. The hardware you're getting for the price feels fair, but ecosystem is always an important discussion. And while they are working to expand that with some interesting options like the FRX, in reference to other areas like the pedals, Turtle Beach just doesn't quite have a mature enough product ecosystem yet, and that's a big advantage for some other brands. I think the elephant in the room here is the Moza R3, or even R5, which are both Xbox compatible with the right wheel. I also need to talk about firmware and quality control. The original V1 race bundle launched with some QC issues, and has been burdened with a myriad of buggy firmware updates that have caused serious problems for some users. And during this review, I also ran into some minor bugs with the KD3. The screen occasionally glitched out, displaying broken graphics, and when I first got the wheel and updated to the 1.1 firmware, the pedals stopped working altogether, and I ended up having to enter a bootloader mode to force an update with a different cable, which took a while to do, and is not something I'd expect many users to figure out without having to first contact support. This is a major area where Turtle Beach still needs work. If I felt confident about the software being fully featured, having an easy upgrade path for the brakes, and most importantly, having stable firmware with good feedback tuning, this would be a pretty strong recommendation. Hey folks, Editing Hokey coming in with a quick last minute update here. Turtle Beach did actually just push a hotfix for the most recent problematic firmware 1.7, and have discussed working on more fixes and feedback adjustability for an upcoming 1.8 version. So hopefully this, alongside that quick 1.12 patch for the KD3, are signs of some progress in that area. I really want to see them dial this stuff in, because I don't want software issues holding back what is otherwise quite interesting hardware. Anyway, thanks for watching this review, folks, and thanks to Turtle Beach for sending me a unit to review. I'll see you all in the next video.